So we have a very special guest speaker this evening. But before they join us on stage, I'd like to propose a brief thought experiment. Imagine for a moment we lived in a world where we can create water, portable water, from thin air. Hundreds of millions of people around the world who lack clean drinking water would obviously benefit from such an innovation. But those same people will then have the opportunity to focus on things that really fulfill them outside of just their immediate survival. And you may ask, well, Chris, why are you saying this? Why are you bringing this up? Well, the answer is simple. Because bold ideas like this has defined our human story. Every critical juncture in our species' history, there has been a technological breakthrough that propelled us out of the previous paradigm into the next phase of our existence. All the great civilizations that came before us grew by empowering their best and their brightest to take risk and dream big, no different than Arch Grants and those of you in this room who support. Well, we have with us tonight one of these audacious minds who has been at the forefront of innovation and entrepreneurship on the world stage for decades and challenges us on issues that will redefine humanity. In 2014, he was named one of the world's 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine. He's the co-founder and vice chairman of Human Longevity, Inc., a genomics and cell therapy-based diagnostic and therapeutic company focused on extending the healthy lifespan. Co-founder and executive chairman of Singularity Technologies, a Silicon Valley institution that studies exponentially growing technologies and their ability to transform industries. I mean, these minor accomplishments, it's just, this guy doesn't really need an introduction. But I now present to you Peter Diamandis, founder and chairman of the Xprize Foundation.
I want to thank you all for inviting me to speak here at the Arch Grants Gala, in particular my dear friend Jack Bader, who's one of my board members of the Xprize Foundation, for having me join you tonight. So we're living during the most extraordinary time ever in human history, a time where an individual, a small team, can do what only governments and largest corporations could do before. It's a time where an individual driven by passion, driven with a desire to change the world can, where, as we teach at Singularity University, we can positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. It's a magical time. And so the whole concept behind the Arch Grants of bringing entrepreneurs here to St. Louis, giving them the seed capital of $50,000 and saying, change the world, that we'll support you to do that, is not only valid, I think it's the only way we're going to change the world. I don't depend on governments to do that. I depend on entrepreneurs. And what I teach at Singularity University, what we teach at the Xprize Foundation, is that we're living during a day and age where the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. That if you want to become a billionaire, help 1 billion people. So it truly is a magnificent time, a time where despite all the negative news we hear night and day on the crisis news network or the constantly negative news network, whatever you want to call CNN, that the world is a magnificent place to be alive, that our kids and their kids have capabilities that were never even available to the kings and queens, the wealthiest, just a century ago. So I personally want to say thank you to St. Louis, to its leadership, its citizens, for being one of those young entrepreneurs that you embraced and helped give birth to my crazy, big, bold ideas. And along that lines, I thought I would take a moment here tonight to share with you my story here in St. Louis, why I'm so passionate and why St. Louis brings to me this concept of a launch pad for big, bold, moonshot ideas. So my story starts something like this. I was born in New York. Both my parents were immigrants from Greece, and I was born expected to become a doctor because my dad was a doctor and my mom could have been a doctor, and so it was go to medical school, young man. That was what my future was all about. But I was also born in the 60s, and during the 60s, 2 things were going on. Number one, the Apollo program. The Apollo program showed us where humanity was today in space, what was possible. We put our minds to this moonshot idea, this crazy idea launched on May 25th of 1961 by JFK, saying we're going to the moon before the end of the decade and bringing Americans back safely. And we had never even put a person into orbit. Alan Shepard had flown a few weeks earlier on a suborbital flight. The other thing that was happening in the 60s that was so amazing was, in 1966, was Star Trek. 50 years ago, Star Trek was created, and Star Trek didn't show us where we were going to go right now. It showed us where we were going in the centuries ahead. And so that combination of Apollo and Star Trek just captured my heart and my soul, and it drove me. It drove me to want to go do things much more than just medicine. And so I said, I'm going to become an astronaut. My mom said, that's nice, son, but you're going to become a doctor. And so at the end of the day, I decided I would try and do both. And I ended up going to MIT and getting an aerospace engineering degree, and got a medical degree. And at the end of the day, I realized that my chances of becoming a NASA astronaut were like 1 in 1,000. I had a better chance of becoming an NBA All-Star at 5'4" than I did a NASA astronaut. So I said, I'm going to have to find some other way to do this. And I'm an entrepreneur in my heart and my soul, like many of you here in the audience tonight. And I said, okay, if I'm not going to do it through the government means, I'm going to do it privately. And so I started studying this. And it was the gift of a book, a book by a local St. Louisan, another dear friend of Jack Bader's and mine, Greg Marinac. And Greg gave me this book called The Spirit of St. Louis. And he said, read this book. It'll inspire you to finish your pilot's license, because I had started and stopped a number of times. And I did read the book. And as I'm reading Lindbergh's story, I noted two things that were important. Number one, that this Orteig Prize of $25,000 offered in 1919 to get people to fly between New York and Paris, or Paris to New York, that $25,000 prize inspired $400,000 of expenditures, 16 times the prize money. And if you had been a betting man, you would not have bet on Lindbergh to win that $25,000 competition, because he'd only been flying for 2 years. And so I said, wow, a $25,000 prize, 16 times the prize money, you only spend it after it's won. What an amazing economic tool to drive innovation. And the other thing I noted was that Lindbergh got his money, his $25,000 of seed money, if you would, from the people in St. Louis, a group of 9 individuals who called themselves the Spirit of St. Louis organization, after which he named his airplane, the Spirit of St. Louis, funded him in this crazy venture to go from New York to Paris. And so I never forgot that. And as I finished reading Lindbergh's biography, his autobiography, I wrote in the back of my book something called Xprize. And I realized that if NASA wasn't going to get me there, what if I created my own prize, my own equivalent of the Orteig Prize? And $10 million was what I believe would be enough money to inspire teams to actually go and build private spaceships that would carry you, me, and a friend up on a suborbital flight into space twice in 2 weeks. The problem was I didn't have $10 million, and I had no idea who was going to put up the $10 million. So I called it the Xprize as a means to sort of have a variable to be replaced by the name of the donor. And it was going to be the Pulitzer, it was going to be the Nobel, it was going to be the, who was going to put up the money? And so I ended up going out and trying to find some place to raise this capital. And that's when I ran first into Doug King, who was the head of the Science Center, who introduced me to a dear, dear friend who's departed way too early, Alfred Kurth, and then to Dick Fleming. And it was between Doug and Al Kurth and Dick Fleming that the idea of let's actually make St. Louis the home of the Xprize, and we'll raise the capital here. And we created something called the New Spirit of St. Louis organization. And back then, we got $25,000 contributions, and I raised about $500,000, but I couldn't get the $10 million purse no matter how hard I tried. I really, really tried. And ultimately, we took a risk. And as an entrepreneur, that's what we do. We take risks. We take risks about something that we are so passionate about, that's driving us in our heart and our soul. And with the amazing support of many members of the New Spirit of St. Louis organization, I'm sure there are many here in the audience here tonight, we announced on the stage under the Arch in St. Louis on May 18th, 1996, a $10 million prize. And we were offering $10 million for the first person to fly between New York and Paris on a suborbital flight from the ground, any place in the United States, up into space, 100 kilometers, land safely within 2 weeks, make the trip again. And at the end of the day, we ended up getting 26 teams from 7 nations around the world to spend $100 million going after this $10 million prize. It was extraordinary. It was ultimately the Ansari family, Anusha, Amir, Hamid Ansari, who funded the prize. We named it the Ansari Xprize in their honor. It took us so long to find the Ansari family, the X sort of stuck around as part of the name. And since then, with our amazing board, and again, thank you, Jack, for the support you've given us, we have launched $125 million worth of prizes. We're about to tee up another $150 million worth of Xprizes. And we're attacking the world's biggest problems. Again, you know, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. So as the Arch Grant organization is giving out these $50,000 grants to innovators, to entrepreneurs, to bring them here to St. Louis, to ignite their passion, to say there's nothing you cannot do, I want to celebrate all of you. And thank you for the support you're giving entrepreneurs, because I truly believe that it's entrepreneurs like those here in the audience. Let me take a moment to recognize 2 Arch Grant recipients, Blake Margraf from ePharmix, who I'm a huge fan and supporter of, and also the team from Janus Choice, an SU portfolio company, to thank you for your work and to thank the Arch Grants for the support that you're doing to help make the world a better place. Ultimately, I truly believe it's entrepreneurs solving problems, attacking problems, creating capabilities that make this world more abundant. We are alive during the most extraordinary time ever in human history, a time where a single individual or small team can do what only governments and large corporations could do before, a world of increasing abundance every single year. I thank you for your efforts, thank you for hearing my story, and thank you to St. Louis for supporting my dreams and the dreams of space entrepreneurs everywhere in creating the Xprize and giving it birth here in St. Louis. I wish you an amazing evening and a beautiful gala. Thank you.